Hello and welcome to another Business Spotlight interview. And today I am joined by Gregor Rae of Business Lab. So, Gregor, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. The sun's not shining, but I'm good.
That's good to hear. It's good to hear that you're good despite though. So, Gregor, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your Business Lab then?
Okay. Yeah. Well, so Business Lab is the third company that I founded or co-founded. So it's 25 years ago, actually, 25 years ago to the month that Business Lab was founded on Aberdeen Science and Technology Park. And it was inspired by business models that I'd seen in the United States, predominantly academic, actually. But it was about pulling organizations together, public and private sector organizations that wanted to get a glimpse of the future. And they felt that they would want to do that collaboratively. And Business Lab was created. Business Lab was created as a laboratory for businesses to explore the future and in emerging areas. So 25 years ago, what was it all about? It was really all about the emergence of the internet, digital technology, and how it was going to become embedded effectively in business. And that was really the essence of Business Lab. So
Fantastic.
yeah, so the model was that we would look at what the emerging themes were around learning organizations, e-business, the supply chain. Interesting, this is all back in the late 1990s, and we basically produced prospectuses for organizations to have a look at and say this is what we are going to embark upon: a 2-3 year research program, bringing together bright organizations, bright business leaders that wanted to explore collaboratively the future. And it was a really interesting, period to develop that. And as I say, it was influenced by models that we'd seen in the United States, predominantly in places like Houston, and in the Northeast the United States, Massachusetts, Boston, Cambridge, MIT. And we'd seen it work academically, but we thought we could do this in a kind of pro-business environment.
Excellent, excellent. And what about yourself? Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and perhaps what you were maybe doing before Business Lab then?
Yeah. Well, so I was born in Aberdeen, but grew up in the Midlands of England, which is why I'm a Leicester City supporter. But we won't go much further on that one. Um, and came back for sad reasons. Came back to Aberdeen, which was where my grandparents were. So I knew Aberdeen really well, and I finished my final 2 years at grammar school in Aberdeen, and went on to Robert Gordon's Institute of Technology and studied architecture, and did architecture for 6 years, and went off to Chicago to do research on the work of a guy called John Wellborn Root in Chicago in the mid-19th century. So that gave me my first flavor of business or thinking in the United States of America. And when I came back from Chicago, there was an entrepreneur who wanted to do something with me and for me. A wonderful person by the name of Alistair Bruce, and he thought we were going to set up an architectural company, but it wasn't an architectural company. It turned into a media company, and we created Format in a garage in Crown Lane in Aberdeen, and Format grew and grew and grew. We had offices in Aberdeen and in London, and we had clients all over the world, really, but predominantly in the oil and gas industry. So this was in the late 1970s, where doing business in Aberdeen was a little bit like shooting fish in a bucket. It was an incredibly buoyant environment in those days. And of course, things went up and things went down, and Business Lab had to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune as well as the good times. And we learned a lot. But as I say, we grew, kept growing. We took on an advanced factory in Cotton Street, and from there we moved to Commerce Street Public School. So we had a 10,000 square meter multimedia facility in Aberdeen, which was undoubtedly one of the best in Scotland and recognized around the UK.
Excellent. So, how did you find, as a person and as a business person, how did you find that going from architecture then into media? You know, was it something totally new for you? Was it and you know, how did that feel then?
Well, I don't know how many architects you know, but they are known as the masters of the universe. So, you could do anything. But no, seriously, I mean, architecture is a phenomenal discipline to study for all kinds of reasons. I mean, it's rooted in design and design philosophy. It's and it does that. If you, I mean, I was lucky as well. I ended up working for a great after I graduated. I ended up working for a great design orientated architectural firm called Baxter Clark and Paul, which really spawned a whole generation of amazing architects in the northeast of Scotland. So they were really they were more like a design studio, to be honest, than an architectural firm, and many of the folk are still around. But so BCP was a great founding for me. Architecture itself was a great founding for me, and my own interest, to be honest, was in design and graphics. I'm not so good at graphics per se, but I was really interested in things like typography. And I was lucky. My first partner, an amazing person, Gordon Calder, totally creative, open-minded. I mean, he stimulated me in incredible ways, and we explored. In those days we didn't care, you could screw up, didn't matter, just kept going. But we started in audiovisual, and so we had no money, but we invested, I think it was about £10,000 in an audiovisual computer. It was a very, very early, almost an Apple, that would program up to 120 Kodak carousel projectors. And that the very fact we could do that gave us a whole new client range. And Shell, Ramco, Conoco, these companies saw what we were doing and would come into the garage and basically commission us to go do work, all over. So it was a natural flow from architecture into design, and then we kind of evolved, we matured. We saw design as just one arm of everything that we were doing. It was what we called strategic communications. So we were wanting to put, the design and photography and multimedia at the heart of a corporate strategy, and it was a good pitch. And we developed the resources to be able to deliver it. We had a wonderful team of people, in an amazing environment, which was very impressive for folk coming in. I mean, folk would come up from London and think there was nothing. What's this doing in Aberdeen? It was as I say, a 10,000 square foot multimedia environment, split level, state of the art technology, wonderful people.
Brilliant, brilliant. And what's been your biggest learning then as a business owner?
Number one, I'm not a very good business person. And it's to do with, I think it's to do with the size of an organization that you can manage. I mean, if I look back, I would say that our optimum size was probably between 12 and 15 people. And then, of course, you have a whole, ecosystem of suppliers and partners that you work with. But at the heart of it, 12 to 15 people who are really good at what they do. And they also understand the principles of project management and the principles of money management. And so we always had the vision, and for some reason we always managed to generate the money, the revenue, the client base to be able to build. But sustainability and future, kind of strategic growth from Aberdeen, that was more difficult. That was much more difficult. And I think I underestimated the complexity of it all. But anyway, we created something pretty special.
Yeah, sounds like it. Sounds like it. And during this amazing journey that you've told us about, has there been anyone that's been a really good mentor or coach for you?
Oh yeah, lots of mentors, and inspirers. I mean, probably one of the first was I was doing work on researching the ability of cities and regions to kind of sustain economic turnaround. And this was driven by the first major downturn in the Aberdeen economy in the early 1980s. Again, we were bust. But I encouraged my partners to let me go to America, to go to California. And there I met up with the governor's team in California, George Machen, who was turning California around. And we'd read about it, and this was long before the internet. So myself and creative director Mick McKee flew off to California, cheeky as heck, to go and kind of walk into the governor. We'd faxed them before, to walk into the governor's economic development office and understand how it is and what it is they'd done to turn the economy around in the United States. So we came back with a whole pile of ideas and presented it to groups in Aberdeen, Shire, and Grampian, and created something called the Grampian Initiative. So at that early stage, the inspiration for me was the United States. It was a way in which the United States could talk about the challenges and could talk, openly about creativity in a language that we could understand and relate to. And of course, when we went across there from Scotland, it was a strange concoction, I suppose, for the Americans. Who are these guys from Scotland coming across to do what California does in some place over there? So, but give them their due, and I suppose us our due. It worked, and that then led to a whole series of engagements in the United States of America. And in Houston, I met a wonderful person by the name of Professor Wilbur Arthur Porter, Skip Porter, who had just created the Houston Advanced Research Center in the Woodlands. And his mentor was a guy called George Mitchell, who was the creator of the Woodlands. So I was going to a place that had been a collaborative research place called HARC, Houston Advanced Research Center, which was run by Skip Porter, whose mentor was George Mitchell. So it was a really kind of heady mix in terms of who's inspiring you, what it is they're trying to do, and what their own principles and visions are. And and Houston itself was in really difficult times, similar to what had been going on in Aberdeen in the 1980s. And through Skip Porter, I was introduced to so many people. And then the same in Austin, because I was looking at what had happened in Austin in 1983, where the Austin economy was basically transformed through the creation and the introduction of MCC, the United States' first for-profit research consortium, and how that came about, and the people that were behind it I met. And it's like just an incredible turbocharged learning experience, meeting wonderful people, doing amazing things and succeeding. And there are so many lessons for us all, I think. If you go in with an open mind and an open heart, you're just going to absorb. And in the process, you can also give back. So throughout my professional life, I've just been lucky. And more recently, I've been asked to get involved in a new consultancy at MIT Boston, with another person that's been hugely instrumental and in my life, influential in my life, Joe Coughlin at MIT Age Lab. So yeah, it happens all the time. It's hugely important. It will change your life, and it can help your business.
Fantastic. Yeah. And from that then, what's the biggest opportunities in your industry right now? And then how does it look for the next 5 years?
Well, it's complexity. I tend to get involved, and I don't do much work in Aberdeen, but historically it has tended to be when I don't know if I can say this, and you'll have to edit it out, but when the shit hits the fan, then people start to panic, and then people become more open about what they need to do and how they need to think. And when they're comfortable, and everyone's comfortable, we just keep doing it the way we're doing it, and you don't want to rock the boat. But when that happens, then it's either you got to do something or you're going to sink. And it's a great time. It's right at the edges. It's at the edges where interesting things happen. So, which is why I went to the United States so often, to see when there's been disasters, in terms of economic disasters in Houston, in Austin, in California, in North Carolina, and in New England. A traditional industry has gone bust. Textiles in Carolinas, and similarly in would you believe it, shoemaking and leather industry in New England, oil and gas in Austin and in Houston, and every business in California in the 1980s thought that California was the worst. Early 80s thought that California was the worst place to be because it was so anti-business. So all these places have gone into a crisis, and it's at that point people get together and they think creatively, and there's a lot of this fantastic creative energy that makes things happen. I don't know whether that answered the question that you asked, but
Yeah, yeah, I think it does. I think it does. It kind of also, you kind of talked a little bit about some of the challenges as well, with that as well. And that was going to be my next question, but I've got to put a slight different spin on it. Is what sort of challenges are there running a business then, just as a business owner? Is there any challenges that you've found?
oh yeah, oh god,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it depends which angle you come at it from. But if you were in traditional business throughout the whole period, what did the it wasn't exponential growth. And by the way, I know people, I've got great admiration for Aberdeen business people, and there's some phenomenal people in Aberdeen that have managed to weather the storm and kept going more or less exponentially. But I suppose when you look at that curve with a magnifying glass, it's got lots of little bumps, ups and downs. It's a bit like looking at the stock market, any day. The shares go up and down, and the closer you get, there's more of these little ups and downs, and you've got to be able to handle it. But I think that there have been some real challenges, some self-made by getting yourself into a position that you hadn't really thought it through, and the implications for all kinds of things, strategic, HR, financial implications of what the route that you've gone along, you hadn't really thought it through, and you ended up in a fight. And of course, I started my own business after architecture in the 1970s. So you can imagine that is, whatever it is, nearly 45, 50 years. So you get into a lot of fights, and and you always look back and say, how the heck did I get into that one? But you have to be able to slog it out. So COVID undoubtedly has been probably the biggest challenge, because we were actually in a brilliant place before COVID arrived. And I was trying to work out, what is it we need to really focus on? And we're working all over the place, and the projects we've got have always been fantastic. And they tend to be large scale projects, which absorb us for a long time. But COVID changed everything. It just changed. Everybody was panicking. Nobody was, especially if you look at public sector, health and education, two relatively big sectors for us, certainly around social care, the aging population, which we've done so much work on over the last 20 years. So all these, there was a great uncertainty, lack of confidence, no money, no staff. Everybody was going on furlough. And ourselves, we were in the West End, nice offices up in Rubislaw Place. But we were, at the same time as all this was happening, I was looking at some charts, weird things to do, but I was looking at some charts that were coming through the Financial Times out of China in the late 2019, early 2020. And I started to do these charts off the computer and sticking them on the wall. And this was all about this thing that was going on in China, and it was about number of infections and number of deaths. And both those curves were hugely exponential. It was like a rocket going to the moon when you looked at it, and you were thinking, what the heck is going on? What is it? And there's no answer to it. And I'm thinking, well, if that comes to our neck of the woods, where are we going? And so the first good decision that I made was, we were coming to the end of our lease in the West End of Aberdeen, and we were going to have to think about another 3 to 5 years in the West End in Aberdeen. And we decided, no, that's not sustainable with what looks like is going to happen. And so in March, we announced that we were not going to renew our lease, which was ending in April, May. And of course, March was the first lockdown of COVID. And so we were moving out of our office. Douglas Anderson up in D-side was moving us out of our offices to moved to 2 home office locations. So my colleague Ron Simpson, commercial director of Business Lab, he lives on Don side up in Inverurie, and I'm on D side. And so Business Lab kind of just re-evolved into remote digital office network, and it's remained that way since then. So that was, it was a huge point for us. We changed our business. Now, fortunately for American business, for all my American business, it meant no difference. It was great. In actual fact, I saw my clients more because we were using Zoom all the time. And Zoom became the de facto, Zoom and Teams, although I'm not a fan of Teams, but it became the de facto method of communication and presentation. And also, because our work is consulting and creative, your work still flows. And I think that if you were in those businesses where you could transfer to digital, then yeah, COVID was going to be a big interruption for you, but you could at least come out having managed that digital process and transformed your business into a truly digital business. And you, hey ho, it was good. Although I would say that post-COVID and the switch back now to more face-to-face and people thinking, well, it's going to be good to go back to the office, actually, then we're going to see another slight change coming up.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you very much, Gregor. It's been a real pleasure speaking to you and answering my questions. And I've got one last question that I always like to ask, from someone who, 25 years later, Business Lab is still here. That's a long time in business terms. A lot of businesses don't last more than 10 years. So 25 years is very successful and well done. So my question is sort of like for you to say to anyone who's watching this, what advice would you give to any business owner, whether they are starting out, about to, want to go into their own business venture, or or already a business owner? What's the one piece of advice that you would give them?
I think, well, first and foremost, you have to, and really have to, believe in what you're doing. And that has to be a pursuit that you're prepared to put everything into. And, if you take the 25 years that I've been doing it, you really have to be prepared to give it all. And, and there is a difference, by the way, when you found your business. If you found your business as a partnership, and many people have done that. A sole trader would start off in that way, but it's a partnership model. Or you start off as a limited company. Now, a limited company is exactly what it says on the tin. If things go bad, then you can, to a degree, walk away from it. Although more and more directors have got to put up some collateral. They've got to put up personal guarantees. And the bigger you get, the more that will become. And so I think that if you're a staff as a micro business with ambition and love for what you're doing, then be prepared to, you've got to go the whole hog. And if you got any doubt, then make sure you're working in an environment where the risks are totally manageable and the cost of failure is something that you can accommodate. And that's not to do with looking negatively. It's just being realistic, because if you've got a family, you've got people that are dependent upon you, then make your decision, with regard to risk, in a fair way, a way that's fair for everybody else. In my early days, I was single, and it was a partnership model for the first 10 years, and it was the best model. It was absolutely the right thing to do. We switched to a limited company, which was also the right thing to do at that time. But as things get, even in a limited company situation, if you've got something that you're proud of, you're really tested. And all I'm saying is make sure that you really are doing what you want to do. You've got your risks sorted, and you are prepared to do whatever it takes.
Fantastic. I think that's some very sound advice there, Gregor. Thank you very much. It's been fantastic speaking to you. I really appreciate your time today. And yeah, again, fantastic. Thank you so much, Gregor.
Not at all, Mark. It was a pleasure to meet you and to talk with you.
Excellent. Thank you very much.